we have been informed of an equally striking instance of perseverance and application in learning on the part of a French political exile in London. His original occupation was that of a stonemason, at which he found employment for some time. But work becoming slack, he lost his place, and poverty stared him in the face. In his dilemma he called upon a fellow exile profitably engaged in teaching French, and consulted him what he ought to do to earn a living. The answer was, become a professor. A professor? Answered the mason, I, who am only a workman, speaking but a patass. Surely you are jesting? On the contrary, I am quite serious, said the other, and again I advise you, become a professor. Place yourself under me, and I will undertake to teach you how to teach others. No, no, replied the mason, it is impossible. I am too old to learn. I am too little of a scholar. I cannot be a professor. He went away, and again he tried to obtain employment at his trade. From London he went into the provinces, and travelled several hundred miles in vain. He could not find a master. Returning to London, he went direct to his former adviser, and said, I have tried everywhere for work, and failed. I will now try to be a professor. He immediately placed himself under instruction. And being a man of close application, of quick apprehension, and vigorous intelligence, he speedily mastered the elements of grammar, the rules of construction and composition, and what he had still in a great measure to learn, the correct pronunciation of classical French. When his friend and instructor thought him sufficiently competent to undertake the teaching of others, an appointment, advertised as vacant, was applied for and obtained. And behold our artisan at length become professor. It so happened, that the seminary to which he was appointed was situated in a suburb of London where he had formerly worked as a stonemason. And every morning the first thing which met his eyes on looking out of his dressing-room window was a stack of cottage chimneys which he had himself built. He feared for a time lest he should be recognized in the village as a quondam workman, and thus bring discredit on his seminary, which was of high standing. But he need have been under no such apprehension, as he proved a most efficient teacher, and his pupils were on more than one occasion publicly complimented for their knowledge of French. Meanwhile, he secured the respect and friendship of all who knew him, fellow professors as well as pupils. And when the story of his struggles, his difficulties, and his past history, became known to them, they admired him more than ever. Sir Samuel Romilly was not less indefatigable as a self-cultivator. The son of a jeweler, descended from a French refugee, he received little education in his early years, but overcame all his disadvantages by unwearied application, and by efforts constantly directed towards the same end. I determined, he says, in his autobiography, when I was between 15 and 16 years of age, to apply myself seriously to learning Latin, of which I, at that time, knew little more than some of the most familiar rules of grammar. In the course of 3 or 4 years, during which I thus applied myself, I had read almost every prose writer of the age of pure Latinity, except those who have treated merely of technical subjects, such as Varro, Columella, and Celsus. I had gone 3 times through the whole of Livy, Sallust, and Tacitus. I had studied the most celebrated orations of Cicero, and translated a great deal of Homer. Terence, Virgil, Horace, Ovid, and Juvenal, I had read over and over again. He also studied geography, natural history, and natural philosophy, and obtained a considerable acquaintance with general knowledge. At 16 he was articled to a clerk in Chancery, worked hard, was admitted to the bar, and his industry and perseverance ensured success. He became Solicitor General under the Fox administration in 1806, and steadily worked his way to the highest celebrity in his profession. Yet he was always haunted by a painful and almost oppressive sense of his own disqualifications, and never ceased laboring to remedy them. His autobiography is a lesson of instructive facts, worth volumes of sentiment, and well deserves a careful perusal. Sir Walter Scott was accustomed to cite the case of his young friend John Leyden as one of the most remarkable illustrations of the power of perseverance which he had ever known. The son of a shepherd in one of the wildest valleys of Roxburghshire, he was almost entirely self-educated. Like many Scotch shepherds' sons, like Hogg, who taught himself to write by copying the letters of a printed book as he lay watching his flock on the hillside, like Cairns, who from tending sheep on the Lammer moors, raised himself by dint of application and industry to the professor's chair which he now so worthily holds, like Murray, Ferguson, and many more, Leyden was early inspired by a thirst for knowledge. When a poor barefooted boy, he walked 6 or 8 miles across the moors daily to learn reading at the little village schoolhouse of Kirkton. And this was all the education he received. The rest he acquired for himself. He found his way to Edinburgh to attend the college there, setting the extremist penury at defiance. He was first discovered as a frequenter of a small bookseller's shop kept by Archibald Constable, afterwards so well known as a publisher. He would pass hour after hour perched on a ladder in mid-air, with some great folio in his hand, forgetful of the scanty meal of bread and water which awaited him at his miserable lodging. Access to books and lectures comprised all within the bounds of his wishes. Thus he toiled and battled at the gates of science until his unconquerable perseverance carried everything before it. Before he had attained his 19th year he had astonished all the professors in Edinburgh by his profound knowledge of Greek and Latin, and the general mass of information he had acquired. Having turned his views to India, he sought employment in the civil service, but failed. He was however informed that a surgeon's assistant's commission was open to him. But he was no surgeon, and knew no more of the profession than a child. He could however learn. Then he was told that he must be ready to pass in 6 months. Nothing daunted, he set to work, to acquire in 6 months what usually required 3 years. At the end of 6 months he took his degree with honor. Scott and a few friends helped to fit him out. And he sailed for India, after publishing his beautiful poem The Scenes of Infancy. In India he promised to become one of the greatest of Oriental scholars, but was unhappily cut off by fever caught by exposure, and died at an early age.